Across civilizations and epochs, countless individuals have met their end in ways that defy imagination. Deaths marked by cruelty, vengeance, and the relentless pursuit of power. From the ancient battlefields of Rome to the chilling practices of distant cultures, these stories are haunting reminders of humanity's capacity for violence. Here are the top 10 most brutal deaths in history. 10. The brutal death of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar's death on March 15th, 44 BCE, known as the Ides of March, marked a pivotal moment in Roman history. He was assassinated by a group of Roman senators who feared his growing power and the implications it had for the Republic. Caesar had been declared dictator perpetuo, which means dictator for life, which alarmed many senators. They believed he was undermining the Republic and aiming for monarchical rule. His reforms and centralization of authority alienated many in the Senate. They felt he was bypassing traditional political processes and diminishing their influence. Senators like Brutus and Cassius were deeply concerned that Caesar's rule would lead to tyranny. They viewed assassination as a necessary act to restore the Republic. On the day of the assassination, Caesar was warned by a soothsayer to beware the Ides of March. Ignoring the warning, he attended a Senate meeting at the Theater of Pompey. There he was surrounded by the conspirators who stabbed him 23 times. Notably, Brutus, once a close ally, participated in the attack, deepening the emotional weight of the betrayal. Caesar's last words are famously believed to be, "Et tu, Brute?" and "You, Brutus?" expressing his shock at Brutus's involvement. Caesar's assassination did not restore the Republic as the conspirators had hoped. Instead, it led to a power struggle and a series of civil wars, ultimately resulting in the establishment of the Roman Empire under his adopted heir, Octavian, later Augustus. The act of assassination, meant to save the Republic, instead paved the way for a more autocratic rule. The crushing death of Giles Corey in 1692. Giles Corey was a prosperous farmer and a full member of the church. He lived in the southwest corner of Salem Village. In April of 1692, he was accused by Ann Putnam, Jr., Mercy Lewis, and Abigail Williams of witchcraft. Ann Putnam claimed that on April 13th, the specter of Giles Corey visited her and asked her to write in the Devil's Book. Later, Putnam was to claim that a ghost appeared before her to announce that it had been murdered by Corey. Other girls were to describe Corey as a dreadful wizard and recount stories of assaults by his specter. Why Corey was named as a witch, male witches were generally called wizards at the time, is a matter of speculation, but Corey and his wife Martha were closely associated with the Porter faction of the village church that had been opposing the Putnam faction. Corey, 80 years old, was also a hard, stubborn man who may have expressed criticism of the witchcraft proceedings. Corey was examined by magistrates on April 18th, then left to languish with his wife in prison for 5 months awaiting trial. When Corey's case finally went before the grand jury in September, nearly a dozen witnesses came forward with damning evidence, such as testimony that Corey was seen serving bread and wine at a witch's sacrament. Corey knew he faced conviction and execution, so he chose to refuse to stand for trial. By avoiding conviction, it became more likely that his farm, which Corey recently deeded to his 2 sons-in-law, would not become property of the state upon his death. The penalty for refusing to stand for trial was death by pressing under heavy stones. It was a punishment never before seen in the colony of Massachusetts. On Monday, September the 19th, Corey was stripped naked, a board placed upon his chest, and then, while his neighbors watched, heavy stones and rocks were piled on the board. Corey pleaded to have more weight added so that his death might come quickly. 8. The horrific death of William Wallace. In 1296, Edward I of England took advantage of a succession crisis in Scotland and imposed himself as ruler with an English administration. Within months, Scottish unrest was widespread. In May 1297, Wallace attacked the town of Lanark, killing the English sheriff, and unrest quickly became a full-blown rebellion. Men flocked to join Wallace, and he began to drive the English out of Fife and Perthshire. In September 1297, Wallace defeated a much larger English force at the Battle of Stirling Bridge. This and subsequent military successes severely weakened the English hold on Scotland. Wallace then launched raids into England. In late 1297, he was knighted and appointed guardian of the kingdom in the name of John Balliol, the deposed King of Scotland. The shock of the defeat at Stirling rallied the English around Edward, who marched north with an army. Wallace's strategy was to avoid confrontation and gradually withdraw. He destroyed the countryside as he went, forcing Edward to march deeper and deeper into Scotland. In July 1298, the Scottish and English armies met near Falkirk, and the Scots were defeated. Wallace escaped and little is known of his movements, but at some stage he resigned the guardianship and was succeeded by Robert Bruce and John Comyn. Wallace then went abroad, notably to France, to seek support for the Scottish cause. He returned to Scotland in 1303. In his absence, Robert Bruce had accepted a truce with Edward I, and in 1304, John Comyn came to terms with the English as well. Wallace was excluded from these terms, and the English king offered a large sum of money to anyone who killed or captured him. Wallace was seized in or near Glasgow in August 1305 and transported to London. He was charged and tried with treason, which he denied, saying he had never sworn allegiance to the English king. His execution was held on the 23rd of August, where he was hung, drawn, and quartered. His head was placed on London Bridge, and his limbs displayed in Newcastle, Berwick, Stirling, and Perth. Saint Cassian of Imola was the bishop of Brescia near Milan, Italy. When a wave of persecution erupted under the Roman emperor, Cassian fled to Imola, Italy, where he found work as a schoolmaster teaching children how to read and write. He was a disciplined and effective educator. In addition to instructing his students in the Christian faith, he also taught them a form of shorthand that allowed them to write as fast as they could speak. A city official discovered that Cassian was a Christian and denounced him to the government authorities. Cassian was arrested and ordered to offer sacrifice to the pagan gods, which he refused. As punishment, the local judge ordered that he be stripped, bound, and tied to a stake. He was then turned over to his pagan students, numbering about 200, to be tortured to death. His students used their iron style, writing instruments, to mercilessly carve into his skin and slowly stab him to death. Saint Cassian died from the many wounds inflicted all over his body. The torture of Junko Furuta. Born in Misato, Saitama, Japan in 1971, Junko Furuta appeared to have a promising future. She had a reputation as a beautiful and intelligent student at Yashio Minami High School. Furuta was also widely known as a good girl who refused to drink, smoke, or do any illegal drugs. But unfortunately, she crossed paths with a classmate named Hiroshi Miyano at school in November 1988. Miyano had connections to the Yakuza, a powerful Japanese organized crime syndicate. He was also determined to date Furuta, and he was enraged when she turned him down. Mere days after the rejection, Miyano and his friend Shinji Minato were at a local park preying on girls and young women when they spotted Furuta on her bike. Miyano and Minato soon abducted her, raped her, and took her to their other friends, Joe Ogura and Yasushi Watanabe, who also raped her. Tragically, that was just the beginning of her agony. The four teenage boys then smuggled Furuta into a home owned by Minato's family. There, she would be held captive and forced to pose as Minato's girlfriend whenever his parents were around. And she was soon subjected to a barrage of heinous beatings, rapes, and torture until her eventual murder in January 1989. Over the course of 44 days, Furuta's captors continued to rape her, inviting other boys and men who they knew to join in on the abuse. In total, Furuta was raped over 400 times. Her captors also subjected her to other forms of torture, like shoving scissors, fireworks, and a light bulb into her vagina. Eventually, they completely destroyed her internal anatomy. The boys also made her drink her own urine, eat cockroaches, and masturbate in front of them. They hung her from the ceiling and beat her with golf clubs, bamboo sticks, and iron rods, and burned her eyelids. Perhaps most tragic is that Furuta could have been saved. Once, a boy who had been invited over to the home left when he saw Furuta and told his brother about her. The brother alerted their parents, who called the police. But when the cops arrived, the Minato family, allegedly fearing Miyano's Yakuza connections, told the police there was no girl in the home. Furuta, too, tried to contact the police, but the boys discovered her and hung up before she could speak. When the cops called back, Miyano assured them the call had been an accident. As punishment for calling the authorities, the boys doused Furuda's legs in lighter fluid and set her on fire. On January 4th, 1989, Junko Furuda's kidnappers finally murdered her. After brutally torturing her one final time, they placed her body in a 55-gallon drum, filled it with concrete, and dropped it on a cement truck. Furuda's body was only discovered after Miyano and Ogura were arrested 2 weeks later on an unrelated gang rape charge. When an officer mentioned an open murder investigation during Miyano's interrogation, the boy mistakenly believed that Ogura had confessed to Furuda's murder, and so Miyano ended up telling the police where to find her body. All 4 boys received shockingly light sentences for the crime. Miyano was sentenced to 20 years in prison, Minato received a term of 5 to 9 years, Ogura was sentenced to 5 to 10 years, and Watanabe received a term of 5 to 7 years. The light sentences were attributed to the boys' youth, but it's widely believed their connections to the Yakuza played a bigger role. Because of this, many people in Japan feel justice has never been served in the case of Junko Furuta, and unfortunately, it seems as if it never will be. In the early 1500s, Dosa led a peasants' rebellion against the nobility of the Kingdom of Hungary. He and his soldiers fought well, but didn't stand a chance against the kingdom's massive army. He was captured after the battle and condemned to sit on a heated, smoldering iron throne, with a heated iron crown on his head and a heated scepter in his hand, mocking at his ambition to be king. While Dosa was suffering, a procession of 9 fellow rebels, who had been starved beforehand, were led to such throne. In the lead was Dosa's younger brother, Gurgly, who was cut in 3 before Dosa, despite Dosa asking for Gurgly to be spared. Next, executioners removed hot pliers from fire and forced them into Dosa's skin. After pulling flesh from him, the remaining rebels were ordered to bite where the hot iron had been inserted and to swallow the flesh. Those who refused, about 3 or 4, were simply cut up, which prompted the remaining rebels to do as commanded. In the end, Dosa died on the throne of iron from the damage that was inflicted, while the rebels who obeyed were let go without further harm. The horrific death of David Douglas. David Douglas is considered one of the greatest plant hunters of the 19th century. From Scone in Perthshire, David was born in 1799 into a working-class household. His father was a stonemason. Upon leaving school, he began a 7-year apprenticeship in the gardens of Scone Palace, under the watchful eye of head gardener William Beattie. David Douglas is the namesake of the Douglas fir tree of Western North America. After traversing the Pacific Northwest, Douglas made his way to Hawaii, where he would die. Douglas was climbing a dormant volcano called Mauna Kea when he fell into a trapping pit meant for wild cattle. While inside the pit, Douglas was mauled and trampled to death by a wild bull. Not a great way to go. However, suspicion also fell on a local hunter named Edward Gurney. Gurney was the last person to see Douglas alive. Money was missing from Douglas's body after it was recovered, and it was Gurney's pit into which Douglas supposedly fell. Trzecia Teresa Bogusławska. Teresa and her mother took care of the treatment of soldiers, residents of Warsaw, and refugees at the Ujazdowski Hospital. Teresa, together with a group of girls of her age, helped the wounded and sick by bringing medicines, food, and news about the ongoing battles and the fate of their loved ones. After losing the defense of the capital, Teresa could not accept defeat. To help the victims of the war, she organized fundraisers, collecting medicines, clothes, shoes, and food. However, this activity was not enough for her. She wanted to actively participate in the underground struggle. At that time, her literary work was revived. On Ash Wednesday, February 23, 1944. While hanging anti-Nazi leaflets, Teresa was caught by a German undercover officer. She was imprisoned in Serbia, in Paviak, from where she was taken to interrogations on Sucha Avenue. Through blackmail, threats, and torture, attempts were made to force her to give the name of the organization to which she belongs, the names, pseudonyms, and addresses of the people to whom she is subordinate. Teresa stated that she had been persuaded to spread the slogans by one of her aunts, no longer alive at the time, and that she had never belonged to any organization. After some time, she was rescued from the cruel prison, but she came back not the same. Now she was apathetic, lost, seriously ill. Her mother managed to put her in a sanatorium in Otwock, where she was supposed to recover. She wanted to take part in the Warsaw Uprising, but due to her condition, she was not allowed to fight. She could sew uniforms and white and red armbands for the insurgents and complete first aid kits. She also carved gorgets with the image of the Virgin Mary. In poor conditions, the condition of her weakened body deteriorated even more. After the uprising, the 15-year-old girl and her mother were sent to the camp for the sick in Torquay. The disease is getting worse, and Dr. Maria Bogusławska took her daughter to Zakopane at the end of December. She did not lose hope that maybe it would improve Tereska's health. Unfortunately, there was a worsening of the disease, a crisis, and a terrible diagnosis: meningitis. On February 1st, 1945, Teresa Bogusławska, the youngest poet of occupied Warsaw, ended her young life. She lived only 15 years, 6 months, and 18 days. Second Balthazar Gerard. In March of 1580, King Philip II of Spain made a dramatic move by placing a substantial bounty on the head of William of Orange. William, a prominent figure in the Dutch revolt against Spanish rule, was not only a symbol of resistance, but also one of the principal architects of the 80 Years' War, which sought to liberate the Netherlands from oppressive governance. Philip's declaration of this reward highlighted the lengths to which the Spanish crown would go to eliminate threats to its authority. The call for action was heeded by Balthazar Gerard, a man driven by ambition and perhaps a desire for notoriety. Gerard successfully assassinated William on July 10, 1584, an act that sent shockwaves throughout Europe. However, his victory was short-lived. In the aftermath of the assassination, Gerard was captured and faced severe repercussions for his actions. The punishment meted out to him was nothing short of horrific. Gerard endured torture methods that were extraordinarily brutal, even by the standards of the late 16th century. The specifics of his torment remain too graphic to fully describe, but they included the use of heavy 300-pound weights, flames, branding irons, flaying of the skin, and sharp nails used to inflict unimaginable pain. Each method was designed not only to punish but also to serve as a warning to others who might consider similar acts of defiance. Ultimately, Gerard's suffering came to an end on July 14th, when he was executed in the market square. The public display of his death was intended to reinforce the power of the Spanish crown and deter any further insurrection. Grigory Rasputin was a Russian who earned the name Rasputin for his early licentious behavior. After undergoing a religious experience, he gained a reputation among the peasants as a holy man, able to heal the sick. He became known to Nicholas and the susceptible Alexandra, and he proved capable of stopping the bleeding of their hemophiliac son, probably by means of hypnotism. He became a favorite at court, despite reports of his continuing and flagrant debauchery. When Nicholas left Alexandra in charge of Russia's internal affairs in 1915, Rasputin influenced her appointment of church officials and incompetent cabinet ministers. After several attempts to remove his harmful influence, a group of noblemen, including Prince Felix Yusupov, assassinated him. First, he ate cake and drank wine that had been laced with cyanide. Nothing happened. Conspirators dropping pretenses, he was then shot in the chest. He collapsed but ultimately survived. It took 2 more shots, including one to the head, to finally put Rasputin down for good. His body was subsequently dumped into the Malaya Nevka River in St. Petersburg.